And they are doing it anyway. If you got involved now, what they would say to you is, this is a done deal. Nothing you can do about it, it's a done deal. Well, first of all, that's not true, because the student learning outcomes have not been passed in final form. No one has signed them. No one has even seen the final form yet. And secondly, the legislature has the power to override the bureaucracy if they want to. And that's where you get involved, is at the legislative level. You ignore the bureaucracy and focus on the elected people. That's where you need to be involved. So that's what parents did. What did the board do? The board continued to promote the regulations. And we continued to ask, where do these come from? How come all the goals in all the states are the same? We wound up looking at the federal level at what was called the New American Schools Development Corporation. New American Schools Development Corporation is part of America 2000. And it's the funding mechanism for the break the mold schools that everybody talks about. Now, the break the mold schools were supposed to be all these new ideas that everybody was going to have in order to change and make education better, and it was going to be novel and everyone would have a different idea. And we started pulling the proposals out of the New American Schools Development Corporation. There were 486 of them. We didn't pull them all. But all the ones we pulled were the same. Same goals, same method, outcome-based education. Same mechanism for working it. Outcome-based education has some flaws to it. When we asked the department, would you please give us your research base, they declined to do that. They told us that this was the best instincts of educators right now, and so we should just trust them, that this was going to make it better. So we did our own research, and we found that in 1987, Johns Hopkins University issued a study saying outcome-based education doesn't work. And we found it was real expensive. Now, when you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. If I took any 4 people in my classroom, I'm the teacher, I only have 4 students, and I teach the lesson, and I test you. 1 of you will pass the test, 3 of you won't. That means I got to go back and reteach the 3 who didn't pass the test. What do I do with that one? Well, that one can sit and wait. That one can become a peer tutor and help teach one of the other 3. Or I have to bring in a second teacher to teach the child who passed the test the first time. Who pays for that second teacher? I teach the lesson one more time. I give the test one more time to the 3. 1 more passes. Now I've got 1 here, 2 here. Do I need 2 more teachers? Do I have 2 peer tutors? Do they sit and wait? Peer tutoring, I have 5 children. I did not send them to school to be the teacher. I sent them to school to be the student. If they're teaching someone else something they already know, they're not learning something new, are they? They're stuck. So outcome-based education takes the top off of achievement. In Pittsburgh the other night, we had a town meeting, and it was more of a debate setting, and one of the presenters for those promoting the idea was a professor from the University of Pittsburgh, and he said the only people objecting to this are people who have good students in their families. That's a very telling statement, because it brings the achievement down. Now, I thought, gee, surely the people promoting this know that this isn't such a good idea. What are they going to do with all of these kids that eventually I'm going to have 30 children in 30 different places? Obviously, I can't have 30 teachers in this classroom. So there must be a plan. When we started pulling the grants out of the New American Schools Development Corporation, we found out that there was indeed a plan. It's called computer-assisted instruction. Each child is tied into a computer, and the computer will serve up the learning nugget that the child must master in order to show that they've met the goal and can keep on going. Well, if you're tied into a computer, who programs the computer? And how do we know that the computer's serving up the right learning nugget? When we pulled one of the grants, it was called from the Center for New West Learning. Here's the learner. The query is the question, goes into the computer. The computer accesses, in order to come up with the individualized lesson plan, the computer accesses biographical data and learning styles, student information module. I didn't know what that was. So I decided I should look, because what is this computer accessing on my child to serve up the learning nugget? What is a learning style? What is the biographical data? Where did it go? Where did it come from? And who has access to it? And what we found out was that, in fact, the state is compiling data banks at a micro-record level. That means that it's available on an individual child. And the state is not doing that by itself. The data banks are being mandated by the federal government through something called the National Center for Education Statistics Common Core of Data. This is the federal data bank. There are 10 handbooks. This handbook is called Student Pupil Accounting. It was first printed in the 1960s. It was updated in the 1970s. This is the 1976 edition, which is the current edition. We have personal identification, name, student number, sex, racial and ethnic group, birth and age date, minor adult status, family responsibility, citizenship, language considerations, veteran benefits, family and residence, parents, male parent, female parent, sponsor, that's if someone sponsored you to come into the country, responsible adult of domicile, perhaps you live with your aunt or your uncle or a grandparent or a brother or a sister instead of with your parents, brothers and sisters living in household, family economic information, family social, cultural information, residence data, physical health, sensory, and related conditions, student medical record number. That's the access number to all of the student medical files, including if you've ever been referred for a condition, all your physical exams. Did you ever abuse drugs? Mental, psychological, and proficiency test results and related student characteristics. The federal government defines a psychological test as a test of the student's personal adjustment and their stand on controversial issues. Referrals for schoolwork for emotional reasons, your mental and psychological characteristics, your effective styles of learning. All enrollments in any school, all school performance, post-school performance, non-school performance, what you do that is not in school, transportation data, any special assistance, did you ever qualify for a state or a federal education program? Now, this is one of 10 handbooks. There was one on staff accounting, there's one on property accounting, and what we found in the property accounting handbook was that it included a little graph that shows, this is the graph, that shows how all the data is linked. The data on the child can be linked to the data on the teacher, can be linked to data on the curriculum at an individual level, so that everything can be tracked. So I know that if Johnny, from this kind of a background, is in Mrs. Smith's class, who has that kind of a background with textbook B, this is how Johnny's going to do. If I want to change Johnny's behavior, I can change his teacher, his textbook, or try to change something in his background. All the data is linked. This was the property accounting handbook. Now, when we first started looking at this, we asked the state and then the federal government, were these used? And they said, oh, no, these were never used. This was just a proposal that we spent all this money printing, and it was never used. It was never part of anything. One federal official told us this has nothing to do with nothing. In the meantime, a parent in Pennsylvania had a child in a guidance program. And the guidance program included an activity on decision making. And the activity was a paper that the little girl who was in 7th grade had to fill out. And the paper, it was like a final exam. And if she didn't do it, she didn't pass the course. And the paper said, every family has some people who crave attention. Who in your family is the loudmouth? Every family has some people who are very competent. Who in your family meets that characteristic? Which would you rather be like? Why? The mom wasn't real happy with this particular curriculum thing, and so she objected. And she went to the school and she said, my daughter's not doing this. She's opting out of this activity and your class. And the school said, you can't do that because it's a mandated class, it's mandated by the state. And she said, oh, really? So she went to the state and she said, I'm opting out. This is against my principles, I don't agree with this, I don't like this, I'm opting my child out. And the state said, you can't opt out. It's mandated by the federal government through something called the Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act. You remember the Drug-Free Schools? We all thought that it was stopping drugs. This is the Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act. These are the 1992 guidelines from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. They're the same in every state. The Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act mandates what programming had to be brought in by the local school district in order to meet the state regulations, which came from ultimately the federal government. It mandated that guidance services had to be provided. It mandated that psychological services had to be provided, that decision-making had to be provided, that self-esteem had to be provided.